Hi everyone. Today's topic of study is a famous poem by an iconic feminist writer called Sylvia Plath. So, first, let me give a basic overview about Plath's life. So, she was an American poet, and most importantly, she is known for her novels, The Bell Jar, and for her poetry collections like The Colossus and Ariel. She was born in Boston, Massachusetts on October 27, 1932. And she met and married the famous British poet Ted Hughes, although they later split. And Plath suffered from depression throughout her life, and that eventually led to her suicide in the year 1963. Majority of her works were posthumously published by her husband Ted Hughes. In the year 1982, Plath also became the first person to win a posthumous Pulitzer Prize. Now, before we go into the poem, I felt that an in depth analysis of Plath's life itself is essential to understand her works better. So, Sylvia Plath was a gifted and a troubled poet, and she is mostly known for her confessional style of her works. Her interest in writing it emerged at a very early age, and she started writing at the age of 11 by keeping a journal. And after publishing a number of works, she won a scholarship to the Smith College, and this was in the year 1950. And there she tried to kill herself by taking a lot of sleeping pills, and this was 3 years later in 1953. Eventually, she recovered, having received some treatment in a mental health facility. Then, eventually she finished her degree in the year 1955. Again, she got a scholarship to Cambridge, and there is, that is where she met Ted Hughes. And the two immediately got married in 1956 and had a very stormy relationship. And they came back to the US, and 1957, Plath spent some time in Massachusetts to study with fellow poets Robert Lowell and Anne Sexton. And a couple of years later, she returned to England. And this was the period when she was slowly rising as a poet. And she had her first collection of poetry, The Colossus, published in England in the year 1960. And this was also the year when she gave birth to her first child, Frieda, and 1962 she got a son, Nicholas. But although they had two children now, the relationship between Plath and Hughes was in no way smooth, and they were falling apart by this time. And after Ted Hughes left her for another woman in 1962, Plath fell into a deep depression, and she constantly struggled with her mental illness, and this was reflected in her work called The Bell Jar, and this is also her only novel. And this is almost an autobiographical novel because it is based on her life, and it deals with a young woman's mental breakdown, and this was published under a pseudonym called Victoria Lucas. Finally, in the year 1963, she committed suicide, and after her death, Ted Hughes edited and published most of her works. If you want to know more about Sylvia Plath's life and her story without having to read much, then you can watch the movie called Sylvia, which is a biopic of the poet herself, which was released in the year 2003, and it also stars the famous Gwyneth Paltrow. So, going back to Sylvia Plath's early childhood, when she was 8, Plath's father died due to diabetes, and her father was a very strict figure. And both his authoritarian attitude and also his death at Plath's age 8, these were two factors, that is, his authoritarian attitudes and his death, drastically defined Sylvia Plath's relationships and her poems. And this can be predominantly seen in her poem Daddy. And her poetry is often associated with the confessional movement. So, coming to the poem, so Mirror, it was written in the year 1961 while Plath was living in England with her husband Ted Hughes, and this was when she had given birth to the first child, and this was actually a very stressful time for Sylvia Plath. She had just become a mother, and she began to dread the idea of growing old and settling down. So this fear of getting old, this had been there inside Sylvia Plath for as long as she remembers, because as a teenager she had written this in her journal, which I have enclosed within quotations here. That is, somehow I have to keep and hold the rapture of being 17. And the second quote, I am afraid of getting older. So, like as early as when she was 17, she had this fear of growing old and begetting children and settling down, not able to do anything. So she had this terrible fear, of whether her beauty will fade away, that all things young and fresh would, be destroyed in her. So the similar attitude, this similar fear of getting old is perfectly reflected in this poem called Mirror. So she basically mirrors her instincts, her innermost feelings in this poem as well. So, analysis of stanza 1. So, this first stanza, it introduces the readers to the mirror. It is silver and it is exact, meaning it only tells the truth and has no other purpose. And it also says, I have no preconceptions. That is, the mirror does not have any prior knowledge about anything. And whatever I see, I swallow immediately. So, like a creature, mirror has a mouth and can digest whole images instantly. So, placing the word swallow for a mirror, it's a bit exaggerated, but maybe the poet is trying to tell us something. And the next line, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. So it describes the unbiased and impartial nature of the mirror. Unmisted in the sense it is unbiased and impartial. I am not cruel, only truthful. So, the idea of neutrality, that is, simply it tells the story as it is. That is, the mirror doesn't manipulate or tries to bend the truth for anyone. It just simply tells the story as it is, no elaborations or no fabrications. So it is also very neutral. It doesn't have any likes or dislikes. So basically the quality of the mirror is explained here in the first stanza. But in addition to that, the mirror is also given a human tendency. Next line, the eye of a little god, four-cornered. So four-cornered in the sense it describes the shape of the mirror. It is not circular or oval. So it has four corners. So maybe it is in the shape of a square. And the eye of a little god, so maybe the mirror is giving itself a godly, feeling. And most of the time, I meditate on the opposite wall. Like it is also like a sage, saintly. So people who meditate. So it is meditating on the opposite wall. It is pink with speckles. I have looked at it. I think it is part of my heart. So it is now describing the opposite wall, which is pink in color. So again, this choice of colors, pink. So it is more girly and it is more feminine. And the patterns, it has some speckles also. And I have looked at it. I think it is part of my heart. Basically, the wall had been like the mirror had been looking at the wall for so long that the wall has become so close to the mirror's heart, but it flickers, faces and darkness separate us over and over. So now we see that some kinds of faces come between the mirror and the wall. That is, maybe real people, human beings are coming to look at their faces in the mirror. So maybe the mirror is confused looking at the wall for so long, or maybe it is losing its grip on reality as well. So anything can be possible. We can do any kind of interpretation, but mostly why it flickers is maybe people are coming to take a look at the mirror. So that's why faces and darkness separate us over and over. So this entire first stanza, it talks about the exact truthfulness of the mirror and its ability to reflect precisely and impartially. And also its love for the pink wall is also established here. So moving on to the second stanza. Now I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. So there is this new character, this woman, And before that, now the mirror has uh, actually transformed itself. It is no longer a mirror, solid mirror anymore. It is a lake. But it is also kind of relative because lake also has the tendency to reflect, right? So now there is this woman who is searching for her true identity within the lake. So she is looking at the lake and she is trying to find out who she is really. Then she turns to those liars, the candles, or the moon. So the woman is not satisfied with what she looks at the lake. Like what she is seeking to see in the lake, she is not able to get that. So maybe what she is thinking about herself, she is not able to get that answer from the lake. So she is extremely unsatisfied, and so she is turning to the candles and the moon. So candles and the moon, they denote something artificial and romantic that doesn't have any meaning or sense, but they just confound women. So next line, I see her back and reflect it faithfully. So the mirror is again emphasizing on its truthfulness because it is being faithful. Although it is making the woman unsatisfied, it is still being truthful, it is still strong in its ground. She rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands. So now the woman, she has no other option but to believe what the mirror shows her, that is what the lake shows her. And she is rewarding with tears, meaning although she is unhappy with what she is looking at in the lake, it shows how desperately she is dependent and reliant on the mirror. And she is completely depressed also. I am important to her. She comes and goes. Each morning, it is her face that replaces the darkness. So, this line, it shows the absolute control that the mirror has over the woman's search for self. So, the mirror is extremely important to the woman as she had been coming to it every morning. So, every morning, the darkness itself is replaced by that woman. Um, Again, how the woman is being highly reliable upon the mirror is highlighted here in the last two lines. In me she has drowned a young girl, and in me an old woman rises toward her day after day like a terrible fish. So, in me, she has drowned a young girl, meaning this woman had been coming to the lake for so long, right when she was a very young girl. So, earlier she used to be, very happy with what she saw in the lake because she was so young and beautiful then. But now, in me, an old woman is rising toward her. So, now she's becoming old and ugly, and she's ugly like a terrible fish. So maybe the inner persona, the inner demon of the woman is being reflected here. So the fact that she is no longer beautiful makes the woman feel ugly, and she resents her own self, and she tries to, fit into, some kind of identity. So, this entire second stanza, it shows the woman's uncertainty of her self identity. And the mirror's cruelty, on the other hand, it is reflecting her outer appearance faithfully and claiming it to be the truth, whereas the woman's inner self is shattered by the truthfulness of the mirror. And the woman's passivity is also reflected here because she is accepting the cruel image that the mirror reflects. And all of these show that the woman's, or it can all, the woman can in turn be considered as the poet herself. So it shows the poet's search for self identity and appreciation from the patriarchal society, which can be considered as a representation by the mirror. So this patriarchal society, it judges a woman by her outward appearance, and just like a mirror which believes that whatever it reflects is the real truth, the patriarchal society also does the same, and this fact traumatizes the woman very greatly. So coming to the analysis, this poem is an exploration of the uncertain self of Sylvia Plath, and it has a hallmark stamp of every one of Sylvia Plath's poems. That is, it has a powerful language, it has sharp imagery, and it has some dark undertones too. And the syntax is very unusual, and also, unlike other poems, it has no rhyme or meter, but it has the use of enjambment. And this poem also deals with the theme of personification to a great depth. And it is written in the first person with the usage of these I, me, us. And also the speaker is obviously the mirror, and in the second stanza it is the lake, which is just the the change of form from the mirror to the lake. So basically mirror is the narrator. And the analysis, so this poem is all about the appearances or the search for self. So that is the primary theme that runs throughout the poem. So Plath wanted to show how powerful an object the mirror is in people's life. So she gave the mirror a voice and a central role, and she wants to highlight that issue that some women have with their image. The inner turmoil of woman caused by the aging process is highlighted by her, and Plath's own struggle for a stable identity is also reflected here with the idea that the face in the mirror must stay young, pretty, and perfect forever. The aging process and the transience of beauty is something that is very natural. But for some women, the patriarchal society has put down certain limitations and restrictions for women, and that has deeply disturbed their psychological self. And as their physical beauty fades away after a particular period, they slowly get this subconscious insecurity which deeply disturbs their personality, and they are pushed to depression, and they also have some suicidal thoughts. So that is the angle from which Sylvia Plath had written this poem, and that was a very personal one, and she also suffered with similar problems. So that's why this poem seems to be very real and authentic in a way. So that's about everything, but there are also other ways of interpreting this poem, and there are also many other references and sources which you can refer to. This is only one particular, like a small insight into this poem. So I hope you like this video, and if there are any further queries or comments, you can leave them in the comment section below. And thank you for watching this video.